It is the middle of the night. Medina is silent, dark, empty. A man is walking alone through the streets. No guards, no servants, no announcement. Just a man, carrying something heavy on his back. And if you had been standing in that alley, if you had looked closely at that face, your heart would have stopped. Because that face belonged to the most powerful man on earth, Umar ibn al-Khattab, the Khalifa of the Muslims, ruler of an empire stretching from Persia to Egypt, the man before whom kings trembled, walking alone in the dark, carrying flour on his back, for a widow he had never met. Nobody was supposed to know about this night. Nobody was supposed to see it. But Allah preserves the moments that matter most. This is that story.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome. Most of us know the name Umar ibn al-Khattab. We know the titles. Al-Faruq, the second Khalifa, the man the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if there was a prophet after me, it would have been Umar. We know the victories. We know Yarmouk. We know the conquests. But we don't know the man. And the man is something entirely different from the title. It is 634 CE. Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu has just passed away. The Muslim world is grieving. And Umar ibn al-Khattab is now Khalifa. The empire is enormous, expanding, active on multiple fronts, millions of people under his care, armies in the field, cities falling, history being written every single day. And at the center of all of it, one man. But here is what you need to understand about that man. Umar ibn al-Khattab did not see leadership as a privilege. He saw it as a burden, so heavy, so terrifying, that he once stood at the pulpit and wept publicly. When someone asked why, he said, I am afraid that on the day of judgment, Allah will ask me about every widow, every orphan, every hungry child under my care, and I will have no answer. That fear was not a speech. It was not performance. It drove him into the streets every single night.
His son, Abdullah ibn Umar, noticed it first. His father, the Khalifa, would disappear after Isha prayer, every night, without explanation, without guards, without telling anyone where he was going. So one night, Abdullah followed him, quietly, at a distance, through the dark streets of Medina. He watched his father walk to the poorer quarters of the city, smaller houses, older doors, and Umar stopped at one of them and knocked softly. An old woman opened the door, a widow, children around her, hungry. Umar did not introduce himself, did not say, I am the Khalifa. He simply asked, Sister, how are you? Is there anything you need tonight? And she told him everything. The flour that had run out, the children who hadn't eaten properly in days, the loneliness, the fear she had kept quiet because she didn't want to burden anyone. She spoke honestly to a stranger in the night, never knowing that stranger was the man responsible for her welfare. Umar listened to every single word. Then he turned around and walked back. Not to send a servant, not to issue a command, not to delegate. He walked back himself to the storehouse, loaded a heavy sack of flour onto his own back, and walked.
Stop here. Feel what this moment actually is. The ruler of the largest empire on earth at that time. A man before whom Roman generals fled. A man whose name the Persian emperor feared. Carrying a sack of flour on his back in the middle of the night. Sweating. Walking. Alone. Not because he had to, because he chose to. Abdullah moved forward. Let me carry it, father. Let me help. Umar stopped, turned, looked at his son, and said, "Will you carry my burden for me on the day of judgment too?" Abdullah stepped back, silent, and he watched his father carry that sack alone, all the way back to the widow's house. Umar cooked for her, sat by the fire and made food, for children he didn't know, in a house no one would think to look for the Khalifa. When the children had eaten, and the woman was no longer afraid for the night, Umar got up quietly and left. She never knew his name.
And this was not a one-time act. It was a routine. There's a narration where Abdullah followed his father to another house. Umar stood at the door for a long time, speaking softly, listening more. When he finally walked away, Abdullah asked, "Father, who lives there?" Umar said, "A blind old woman. She has no one. I come to talk with her so she doesn't feel completely alone in the world." A blind old woman, alone in Medina, not forgotten by Allah, and because of that, not forgotten by his Khalifa.
This is the man who conquered empires, the man who changed the course of history with a single decision. And in private, away from armies and conquests, he was a man sitting on the ground next to a widow's fire, cooking food for children who were hungry. Both are the same man. That is the point. That is what we have forgotten.
Umar ibn al-Khattab once said, "If a goat stumbled on the banks of the Euphrates and broke its leg, I would be afraid Allah would ask me about it on the day of judgment." A goat on a riverbank. That was his private fear, that every soul under his care, every family, every child, every animal, was his personal responsibility before Allah. And that fear is what drove him into the streets of Medina every night. Not power, not glory. Fear.
Our children today know every Marvel character by name, every football player, every trending celebrity. But they don't know the man who carried flour on his back at midnight for a widow he had never met. That is our real hero. And I hope this story reminded you of who we are. Share it with one person, that is all, because stories like this don't spread by themselves. They spread through people who care. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum.